What if the bank you've used your whole life just wasn't around in 10 years? Seriously, that's not some sci-fi plot, it's the reality of the fintech revolution. Today, we're going to break down how the absolute titans of finance are in a fight for their very survival. Okay, let's just let this sink in for a second. When the CEO of one of the most powerful banks in the entire world says something like this, you know it's the real deal. This isn't just a casual warning from Jamie Dimon, it's basically an admission. The threat isn't some distant storm anymore. No, it's a full-on invasion of new ideas, new tech, and a completely different way of thinking about money. And that, right there, that is the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? Are these enormous institutions with their marble lobbies and, centuries of history, are they actually capable of changing, or are they just too big, too slow, and, well, destined to become relics? Let's dig in and find out. To really get to the bottom of this, we first have to pop the hood. What is it about the very DNA of a big bank that makes true, game-changing innovation so incredibly difficult? So the first huge roadblock is just the mechanics of it all. Imagine trying to design a brand new self-driving electric car, while like 90% of your engineers are busy patching up a fleet of old steam engines. That's pretty much the reality for banks. A huge chunk of their tech budget isn't for creating the future, it's just for keeping the past from completely falling apart. And that tiny 4.6% growth in spending, that's not even enough to keep up in the race. And this, right here, this really shows the deeper issue. It goes so far beyond just old computer code. It's a fundamental culture clash. A bank is like a marathon runner. It's built for stability and predictability over the long haul. A startup? That's a sprinter, built for explosive speed and changing direction on a dime. See, in a bank, a single mistake can cost millions and get regulators knocking on your door, so failure is the absolute worst-case scenario. But in a startup, failure is just data. It's a crucial step on the path to figuring things out. These two mindsets aren't just different, they're almost polar opposites. So they know they have a problem. The first strategy for a lot of these banks was to try and spark a revolution from within. They tried to launch their own internal startups, but how on earth do you do that in an environment that's basically allergic to the whole idea? The crucial insight they had was this. For a new, risky idea to have any chance of surviving, it couldn't look new or risky. So these innovation teams had to become masters of corporate camouflage. They had to frame their radical projects in the same safe, familiar language as any other internal investment. It's literally innovation as a stealth mission. And they actually developed a pretty brilliant four-step playbook to pull it off. First, you need a powerful sponsor to be your shield. Second, you have to bring the gatekeepers, legal, risk, compliance, into the loop from day one. Then, you prove people actually want this thing with cheap, quick prototypes. And finally, you wrap it all up in a business case that looks so boring and predictable that it just sails through approvals. It's methodical for sure, but it's how you sneak the future into the present. Of course, a lot of banks tried to find a shortcut. You've definitely seen the headlines. Global bank launches new innovation hub. They set up these slick, separate offices with beanbag chairs, foosball tables, maybe some free kombucha on top. But did they actually work? Well, the results have been, let's just say, a mixed bag. A lot of these labs ended up being little more than expensive PR stunts, what some people call innovation theater. They were often totally disconnected from the real business, and they struggled to get their cool ideas reintegrated back into the mothership. The most radical vision for a lab? To just stop tinkering and build a brand new in-house competitor from the ground up. Okay, so if building a speedboat inside an aircraft carrier is that hard, the next logical step is to look outside the fortress walls. And this is where we've seen a really fascinating shift in the whole financial world. The early days of fintech, it was all about disruption. The startups were the so-called bank killers, but that whole narrative has completely flipped. Now the smartest people on both sides have realized that collaboration is a much more powerful and, frankly, profitable strategy than just going to war with each other. And what's really interesting here is how it's a perfect match. It's a classic case of opposites attract. Banks have exactly what startups desperately need: millions of customers, brand trust, deep pockets, and all that regulatory know-how. And fintechs have precisely what banks are missing: agility, cutting-edge tech, and a real genius for creating amazing customer experiences. Put them together, and they can do what neither could ever do alone. This whole partnership idea has even evolved into a formal investment strategy. Banks are now creating their own corporate venture capital arms, directly funding the very startups that are trying to disrupt them. It's the classic, if you can't beat them, fund them approach, and maybe buy them later. But this entire revolution isn't just about slicker banking apps or making profits faster. There's a much bigger, more human side to this whole story. And if it's done right, this innovation can be a powerful force for social good. Just look at this number. In the UK alone, that's how many adults are at risk of being completely left behind by our digital world. They're facing what's called digital and financial exclusion, which means they can't access the basic tools that so many of us just take for granted. And the crucial point is that this has devastating real-world consequences. I mean, think about it. If you don't have a bank account, you can't get the discount for paying your electric bill by direct debit. You have to use expensive check cashing services instead of a free ATM. You end up paying higher interest rates. All those little costs add up to what's called a poverty premium. It's a literal tax on being poor. It's a vicious cycle that is incredibly hard to break out of. And this is where that collaboration we were talking about becomes a moral imperative. As this quote from Lloyd's Banking Group makes really clear, there's a huge opportunity here for banks and fintechs to work together, not just for profit, but to build a financial system that actually includes everyone. So we've seen the battle for banking, but the fintech revolution is far from over. Now it's setting its sights on another, even bigger financial giant that's been kind of flying under the radar, the insurance industry. The scale here is just mind-boggling, over $4.5 trillion. Globally, it's a colossal market that, until very recently, has been pretty much untouched by all this digital disruption. It's been kind of stuck in the past. Well, it's a complex industry for sure, with huge barriers to entry, but the tide is finally turning. Tech innovators are starting to see massive opportunities to shake up this old-school world, and they're attacking it from a few key angles. First, there's distribution. Forget your local insurance agent. Now we have digital sites that let you compare dozens of quotes in seconds. Second, big data. For centuries, insurers had a monopoly on risk data. Not anymore. Tech companies know more about our behaviors than any insurer ever could. And third, we're seeing entirely new models pop up, from on-demand insurance for your bike to peer-to-peer models where communities pool their own risk. And that brings us right back to this central question. The entire financial industry is at a crossroads. Will the old guard, the established giants, just become the basic plumbing, the dumb pipes, while all these agile new companies build the exciting, profitable services on top? Or will they successfully transform their culture, embrace real innovation, and become the architects of their own future? The one thing we know for sure is that the revolution is happening right now, and there is no going back.